Awesome. Thank you all for sticking around to the end of the conference to hear this presentation. We really appreciate it. I'll just start by introducing myself. I am Jacob Van Haaften. I've recently completed a master's degree at Trent University in Negotiating, Peterborough, Ontario. And what we'll be talking about today is a little bit of the research that came out of my master's degree. And I'm excited to talk specifically about one component for more than 10 minutes because I just did my master's defense last week and had 15 minutes to talk about the whole project. So this is very refreshing. And I'm sure other academics here can relate to that. Tracey, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Tracey Taylor, and I am from Curve Lake First Nation, and I'm also the cultural administrator for the Curve Lake Cultural Center. I've lived in Curve Lake all my life, and we are in near Peterborough, Lakefield, Ontario. So it's a little community. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let me get back to my PowerPoint. So before we get into it, we are going to share a couple of quotes from this research project. And in accordance with our OCAP protocol in the community, there's a protective disclaimer on any direct quotations from the participants. And that's just to ensure that if, for example, you find something in this presentation or other publications based on this research that you really want to quote, that has to go through the Curve Lake Cultural Center just to ensure that it's being used in an appropriate way and that it's not misrepresenting what this research project was trying to accomplish. Now, for this presentation, I'll provide a really brief description of the project that we conducted, and then talk about the results broadly, and then talk a little bit about the results in the context of climate change and climate hope, and then move on to sort of future directions and teachings about climate hope that we have from this project. I'll pass it back to Tracey to tell you a little bit about Curve Lake First Nation and the community.
Our Anishinaabe name for this community is called Ashkigomong. So we're a small Mississauga community within the larger Anishinaabe Nation, situated on a little peninsula between Chemong Lake and Buckhorn Lake. The members of Curve Lake have long had a deep and meaningful connection to creation in our beautiful territory, fostered through the hunting, fishing, gathering, harvesting, and ceremony that strengthens our relationship to each other and to the land. Despite the introduction of Treaty 20 and the Williams Treaties, Curve Lake has kept this connection strong and fights to secure our rights to protect this land for future generations.
Miigwech, thank you, Tracey. And you can see in this image here just generally where Curve Lake is situated in southern Ontario there. Now, the purpose of the project that we're presenting on today was to determine any priorities and concerns in Curve Lake First Nation with regard to community connection with creation and the natural world in general. And that was based on some disturbing historical and modern events surrounding land claims and unjust treaties and that sort of thing, affecting individuals in the community's ability to engage in traditional activities and land-based ceremonies. The second goal was to better understand how community members connect with creation in the community and what sort of activities and teachings can be passed on through that. So to accomplish this, we conducted research sharing circles, which are similar to focus groups, except that they encourage the researcher to engage in the conversations and bring their positionality into the conversations as well. And we evaluated these through thematic analyses. This provides sort of a broad overview of how the data was coded. We did both an inductive and a deductive thematic analysis. The inductive thematic analysis was conducted just like a standard thematic analysis with open coding and the development of themes, but it was also collaborative. So those themes were brought back to the research sharing circles to ensure that they are representative of what the participants were discussing. And then we also did a deductive thematic analysis that was coded onto the medicine wheel components of connection with creation that we'll talk about a little bit later on. So really quickly through some of the results from the inductive thematic analysis, we coded these under two general themes, that being concerns about connection with creation in the community, and then also priorities for connection with creation in the community. So in terms of concerns, there were individuals who are concerned about non-Anishinaabe or forces outside of the community impacting the way that they can connect with creation, the continued encroachment of territory on Curve Lake First Nation, the impacts of treaties, including both modern impacts such as hunting regulations and also legacy impacts as well. And then this general idea that there were a lot of misconceptions in the community about what treaties do and do not guarantee. And this is particularly important because for those who don't know, the way that sort of Ontario is divided up in terms of traditional and treaty territories, depending on where a First Nation is located, there are certain regulations that are specific to that treaty territory. In terms of priorities for connection with creation, there was a lot of discussion about increasing accountability and discourse from government agencies and collaborating on sort of protection of natural areas. There's also a lot of conversation about education on treaties and then also about specific land-based practices. And finally, there was an overall conversation about the reclamation and collaboration on the protection of traditional sites. In the deductive thematic analysis, what we did was coded elements of connection with creation into 5 different sort of components. The component at the center is the Anishinaabe concept of Minobamadswin that we'll talk a little bit later, but it roughly translates to living in a good way. And it sort of outlines the ways to live in responsible and reciprocal relationships with the natural world. And then we also looked at mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual ways in which individuals can connect with creation or connect with the natural world. I wanted to highlight a couple of really specific quotes from this project that I found particularly interesting for this conversation. The first comes from a participant who was concerned about how we can give back essentially to population growth of animals and other species. So this participant said, I'd like to see the community and other neighboring communities come together and adapt so that we can give back to population growth. Then another individual talked about the need for collaboration with other individuals in the territory. And they said that we're all Anishinaabe people of this territory. There are 7 reservations. We all live in nomadic ways. We all have family in every single one. And they're all caretakers of this land. There was also an individual who talked about living in a good way and creating good moccasin tracks for themselves and then also for future generations. And thinking about concepts like climate change and environmental action in a way that goes beyond the here and now and that talks about preservation well beyond the next 5, 10, 20 years. And then there was also one individual who made mention of how the protection of land and water and nature in general is a foundational aspect of Anishinaabe identity. And I thought this was particularly fitting for this conference to share because I think it does provide a little bit of hope and that there are individuals who feel that it is deeply a part of their identity to help protect the natural world. Now I'll pass it back to Tracey to talk a little bit more about the medicine wheel here.
So Climate Hope Medicine Wheel is an important spiritual concept for Anishinaabe and those seeking to begin or strengthen their cultural understanding. It is a simple image, but carries a deep and meaningful teachings that will guide us throughout our lifetime. So this medicine wheel represents all of creation. It reminds us of our place in this world and the responsibilities we hold during each season. It is a cyclical teaching, and it's necessary to follow on a continual basis. Connection with creation can be fostered through the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual avenues. Communication about climate change must incorporate these same aspects because people connect differently.
Thank you much, Tracey. Yeah, this was something that came out in the research that was really interesting, particularly in this idea of climate hope, because in the field that I come from, which is sort of environmental or eco-psychology, we talk a lot about how individuals connect with the natural world through physical activity and also through mental processes. But this project really revealed that we can get people to connect with the natural world and then also care about the natural world through other avenues like the emotional and the spiritual. Now I'll briefly talk about the concept of Minobamadswin and start with a quote from one of the participants who said that Anishinaabe are given a huge, huge responsibility to look after this earth. Now, the term Minobamadswin roughly translates to the good life or living in a good way. And it's a foundational teaching about how to interact with the non-human world and how to interact with others as well. And really through this project, something that kept coming to my mind is that it is almost a manifestation or a set of instructions for the practice of ecocentrism, which is the belief that all aspects of creation, all aspects of the natural world have inherent value. Now, in the current research, this practice of Manopa was really centered on the seven grandfather teachings, which I'll get Tracey to talk about again.
Okay, so number 1 is Sagdawin, love. Number 2 is Minadawin, respect. Dabadzawin, humility. Akdawin, bravery. Goakwazin, honesty. Wakwan, wisdom. And Dabwin, truth. The seven grandfathers. So when engaging with creation, our teachings has told us about the seven grandfathers, and whether through hunting, trapping, gathering, or recreation, it's vital to implement these seven grandfather teachings. By understanding and recognizing and utilizing these teachings, one ensures that they are being mindful of the land and that they're aware of the impacts that they could have, and that they know how to use these gifts to make sure that impact is a positive one.
Miigwech. And this was something else that we wanted to highlight under this concept of climate hope and escaping that doomism, is that there are potentially instructions or teachings out there that are not part of the mainstream, but that could be so incredibly valuable in fostering this sense of hope and this idea that preservation is possible. So on behalf of myself and Tracey and the Curve Lake community, I want to say Miigwech, thank you very much for listening to us today. Just to sort of conclude this presentation, hopefully provided you with a really brief understanding of what overall the research was about in terms of community concerns and priorities regarding connection with creation, and also a brief exploration of how community members connect with creation. And then finally, hopefully provided some insights into climate hope through the medicine wheel and also through the concept of Manopa. So thank you.